3 people on a yacht, a Hollywood star found floating in the water, and a death investigation that spanned 4 decades, leaving behind more questions than answers. What really happened to Natalie Wood on that November night in 1981? Who was the last person to see her alive? And why has the case been reopened not once, but twice? Tonight, we pull back the curtain on one of Hollywood's most enduring mysteries and reveal why investigators now believe they finally know the truth. November the 29th, 1981. The waters off Santa Catalina Island, California. The 60-foot yacht Splendor rocks gently in the darkness of Isthmus Cove. Aboard are 4 people: actress Natalie Wood, her husband Robert Wagner, her co-star Christopher Walken, and the boat's captain, Dennis Davern. By morning, only 3 remain alive. The news breaks on Sunday morning. Natalie Wood, 3-time Oscar nominee, star of Miracle on 34th Street, Rebel Without a Cause, and West Side Story, is dead at 43. Her body, clad in a nightgown, red down jacket, and socks, discovered floating face down a mile from the yacht, near an inflatable dinghy that had washed up on the rocky shoreline. The official ruling: accidental drowning. A tragic end to a legendary career. Natalie Wood wasn't just any Hollywood star. Born Natalia Nikolaevna Zakharenko to Russian immigrant parents in 1938, she was a true child of the studio system. By age 4, she was already on camera. By 16, she was a serious dramatic actress, earning her first Academy Award nomination for Rebel Without a Cause, alongside James Dean. Her transformation from cherubic child star to sophisticated adult actress was one of the rare Hollywood success stories. A career spanning 4 decades without the typical child star flameout. Her personal life generated as much attention as her films. At 18, she married Robert Wagner, creating what appeared to be Hollywood's perfect couple, the Princess and the Prince, 8 years her senior. The marriage lasted 5 years before ending in divorce in 1962. Wood then married British producer Richard Gregson, had a daughter, Natasha, and divorced again. In what seemed like a Hollywood fairy tale, she remarried Wagner in 1972. They had a daughter, Courtney, and projected the image of a couple who had found their way back to each other after years apart. By 1981, Wood was filming Brainstorm with Christopher Walken, fresh off his Oscar win for The Deer Hunter. The Thanksgiving weekend boat trip to Catalina was meant to be a relaxing getaway during a production break. Wagner, 51, invited Walken, 38, to join them. Captain Dennis Davern, who had worked for the couple for years, would navigate the Splendor, a yacht named after Wood's film Splendor in the Grass. What transpired on that yacht would become one of Hollywood's most enduring mysteries. The initial investigation was swift, perhaps too swift. The case was closed within 2 weeks. Wood's death certificate listed drowning and other undetermined factors as the cause of death. But questions lingered. How does an actress who was famously terrified of dark water end up in the ocean in the middle of the night? Why did hours pass before anyone reported her missing? And why did the stories of those on board keep changing? For decades, these questions remained unanswered, filed away in the cold case archives of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. But that was about to change, because sometimes secrets don't stay buried forever. The story told to the public in 1981 was simple, if perplexing. According to Wagner's initial statement to investigators, he and Walken had gotten into a political argument after dinner at a restaurant on the island. They returned to the yacht, continued drinking, and Natalie eventually excused herself and went to bed around 10:45 p.m. Wagner claimed he went to check on her around midnight and discovered she was missing, along with the yacht's dinghy. The assumption: she had tried to secure the dinghy, which had been banging against the hull, slipped, and fallen into the water. Case closed. A tragic accident. But this neat narrative began unraveling almost immediately. The mask of accidental drowning started showing cracks from the very beginning. First, there was Wood's well-documented hydrophobia, her intense fear of water, particularly dark water. Friends and family consistently reported that Wood was terrified of the ocean. Her daughter Natasha Gregson Wagner would later recall, "My mom didn't even go in the swimming pool. She had a tremendous fear of water." The idea that she would voluntarily get into a small dinghy at night, alone after drinking, strained credibility. Then there were the inconsistencies in the timeline. Wagner initially claimed he noticed Wood missing around midnight. However, the harbor master would later report that no one radioed for help until 1:30 a.m., an inexplicable 90-minute gap. When questioned, Wagner reportedly told authorities he thought Wood might have taken the dinghy to go to shore, despite the fact that she was in her nightgown and it was the middle of the night with temperatures in the low 60s. The physical evidence presented its own contradictions. Wood's body, when recovered, showed bruising on her arms, wrists, and face, suggesting a struggle of some kind. The Los Angeles County coroner, Thomas Noguchi, noted these bruises, but couldn't definitively determine if they occurred before or after death. The alcohol in her system, her blood alcohol content was 0.14, well above the legal limit, further complicated matters. Was she impaired enough to lose her balance? Or was something else at play? Perhaps most troubling was the evolving story of Captain Dennis Davern. In the initial investigation, Davern largely corroborated Wagner's account, but as years passed, his version of events began to shift dramatically. By 2009, he was telling a very different story, one that implicated Wagner directly in Wood's disappearance. According to Davern's later accounts, the argument that night wasn't just political. It was intensely personal and jealousy-fueled. Wagner, Davern claimed, had been drinking heavily and grew increasingly agitated by what he perceived as flirtation between Wood and Walken. The argument allegedly escalated to the point where Wagner smashed a wine bottle on the table. Wood, upset, reportedly retreated to her stateroom with Walken soon following to his own cabin. What happened next remains disputed. Davern alleged that he heard a loud argument between Wood and Wagner, followed by silence. When he went to check, Wagner allegedly told him, "Natalie is missing." According to Davern's revised account, Wagner instructed him not to turn on the lights, use the searchlight, or radio for help immediately. Crucial delays that potentially cost Wood her life if she was still alive in the water. This version of events transforms the narrative from tragic accident to something potentially much darker. It suggests not only possible negligence, but raises questions about whether Wagner's alleged jealousy and the heated argument may have led to a physical confrontation that ended with Wood in the water, either by accident or deliberate action. As Davern told Vanity Fair in 2008, "I think it was a matter of, we're not going to look too hard. We're not going to turn on the searchlight. We're not going to notify anybody right now." If true, these decisions are difficult to reconcile with the actions of a husband frantically searching for his missing wife. The gap between the public story and emerging reality widened further when investigators discovered that the official reports from 1981 were surprisingly incomplete. Key witnesses from nearby boats who reported hearing a woman crying for help in the water were never thoroughly interviewed. The dinghy, when found, reportedly had its oars neatly in place and showed no signs of the chaotic boarding that would be expected if Wood had been trying to get in it while in the water. Here's where the mask truly slips. In 2011, 30 years after Wood's death, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department officially reopened the investigation. What had long been presented as settled fact was now back in question. The catalyst? New witnesses coming forward with accounts that contradicted the accident narrative and pointed toward something potentially more sinister. Number 5. The Changing Timeline. The Night That Never Ended. Beetlejuice. Robert Wagner, Natalie Wood's husband, was the primary source of the original timeline of events, supported initially by Captain Dennis Davern. Conflict/incident. Wagner's account of when he noticed Wood missing has shifted multiple times. Initially, he claimed he noticed her absence around midnight and assumed she had taken the dinghy to shore. However, the emergency call to shore wasn't made until 1:30 a.m., and the Coast Guard wasn't contacted until 3:30 a.m. By the time a full search was launched, nearly 4 hours had passed since Wood was last seen alive. Marty Rulli, who co-authored Davern's 2009 book, Goodbye Natalie, Goodbye Splendor, told investigators that Davern had confided in her that Wagner instructed him not to radio for help or turn on the searchlight immediately after discovering Wood was missing. "Let's not do anything. Let's see if she's on another boat," Wagner allegedly said, despite the improbability of Wood visiting another vessel in her nightgown in the middle of the night. Impact. This delay in reporting and searching for Wood potentially reduced any chance of her being rescued alive if she had initially survived entering the water. The temperature of the Pacific Ocean that night was approximately 60 degrees, cold enough to induce hypothermia within 15 to 30 minutes. Every minute of delay significantly decreased Wood's chances of survival. Red. What this actually shows is that the critical window for saving Wood's life was potentially squandered, raising questions about whether this delay was merely shock and poor decision-making or something more calculated. Number 4. The unheard witnesses. Voices in the dark. WHO. Multiple people on boats anchored near the Splendor in Isthmus Cove that night, including Marilyn Wayne, an occupant of a nearby yacht. Conflict/incident. Wayne reported hearing a woman's voice calling for help in the water around midnight. "Help me! Somebody please help me!" the voice cried out, according to Wayne's statement. The cries continued for about 15 minutes before falling silent. Wayne and others on her boat called toward the sounds and turned on their searchlight but couldn't locate anyone in the dark water. Remarkably, Wayne's account wasn't thoroughly investigated in the original case. She later claimed that after coming forward she received a threatening note telling her to keep quiet about what she had heard. Other boaters in the cove also reported hearing a woman's cries, but these testimonies were largely overlooked in the rush to close the case. Impact. These witness accounts directly contradict the timeline provided by Wagner and raise disturbing questions. If Wood was calling for help in the water at midnight, then she wasn't missing from the boat. She was actively drowning while those aboard the Splendor allegedly delayed searching for her. These testimonies suggest that Wood was alive in the water, conscious, and calling for help at a time when a prompt rescue operation might have saved her. Red. What this actually shows is that there were potentially crucial witnesses whose accounts were minimized or ignored in the original investigation, suggesting either incompetence or, more troublingly, a deliberate attempt to avoid evidence that complicated the accidental drowning narrative. Number 3. The mysterious bruises. Marks of violence. Ohio. Dr. Thomas Noguchi, then the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner, conducted Wood's autopsy, with subsequent analysis by Dr. Michael Baden and Dr. Cyril Wecht, both forensic pathologists who reviewed the case decades later. Conflict incident. Wood's body showed numerous bruises, particularly on her arms, legs, and face. Dr. Noguchi noted these in his 1981 autopsy report but couldn't definitively determine if they occurred before or after death. Years later, Dr. Baden observed that the bruises appeared to be fresh and could have occurred before she entered the water. Dr. Wecht went further, stating in a 2018 documentary that the bruises were consistent with being the victim of an assault. Particularly suspicious was a series of diagonal bruises on Wood's right forearm and wrist, which some experts have suggested are defensive wounds, the kind that occur when someone raises their arm to protect themselves from an attack. There were also bruises on the backs of her legs that seemed inconsistent with simply falling off a boat. Impact. The forensic evidence suggests a possible physical altercation before Wood entered the water. This directly challenges the accidental fall theory and raises the disturbing possibility that Wood may have been the victim of a physical assault before ending up in the ocean. In 2013, These concerns led the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office to change Wood's death certificate from accidental drowning to drowning and other undetermined factors, an unusual amendment after so many years. Read, what this actually shows is that the physical evidence never fully aligned with the accident narrative, and medical experts who've reviewed the case increasingly believe that Wood's body tells a story of trauma that preceded her drowning. Number 2. The Captain's Confession. The Witness Who Changed His Story. WHO, Dennis Davern, the captain of the Splendor, who was one of only 3 people on the yacht with Natalie Wood on the night she died. Conflict Incident. After largely supporting Wagner's account for years, Davern dramatically changed his story. In 2009, he co-authored a book claiming that he had been pressured to lie to investigators in 1981. By 2011, Davern was making even more explicit allegations, stating on television, "I made some terrible decisions and mistakes. I did lie on a report several years ago." When asked if Wagner was responsible for Wood's death, Davern replied, "Yes, I would say so." According to Davern's revised account, he witnessed a fierce argument between Wagner and Wood on the yacht's deck, the culmination of a night of tension and heavy drinking. He alleged that after this argument, Wagner informed him that Wood was missing, but then discouraged an immediate search. Most damning of all, Davern claimed that Wagner told him they needed to get their story straight before calling for help. Impact. Davern's reversal transformed the case from a tragic accident to a potential homicide investigation. His statements were a primary factor in the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department's decision to reopen the case in 2011. Though some have questioned Davern's credibility given the decades he waited to come clean and the financial incentives of book deals and media appearances, investigators have taken his revised account seriously enough to re-examine all aspects of the case. Read, what this actually shows is that the person closest to the events of that night, besides Wagner and Walken, believes that the truth about Wood's death has been deliberately concealed and that he himself participated in that concealment. Number 1. Wagner's reclassification. From grieving husband to person of interest. Beautiajos. Robert Wagner, now in his 90s, has maintained for 4 decades that Wood's death was a tragic accident. He has never been charged with any crime related to her death. Conflict Incident. In February 2018, Lieutenant John Carina of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department announced a bombshell. Robert Wagner was now officially a person of interest in the investigation of Natalie Wood's death. As we've investigated the case over the last 6 years, I think he's more of a person of interest now, Carina stated. I mean, we know now that he was the last person to be with Natalie before she disappeared. This reclassification came after investigators spoke with more than 100 witnesses, many of whom had not been interviewed in the original investigation. According to Sheriff's Department statements, Wagner's account of the events had changed over time, and his version of events just don't add up. Most tellingly, investigators cited Wagner's continued refusal to speak with them since the case was reopened. Despite multiple requests, Wagner has declined to be interviewed by the new investigators, a stance that officials have publicly described as suspicious. Impact. The reclassification of Wagner from grieving widower to person of interest represents a seismic shift in the official position on Wood's death. While falling short of naming him a suspect, it places Wagner at the center of the reinvestigation and suggests that law enforcement now believes he may have been involved in, or at least knows more about, the circumstances of Wood's death than he has admitted. This development has divided those who knew the couple. Some friends and family members, including Wood's daughter Natasha, have stood firmly by Wagner, while others, including Wood's sister Lana Wood, have publicly called for Wagner to tell the truth once and for all. Read. What this actually shows is that after nearly 4 decades, authorities are no longer satisfied with the accident narrative and are now officially viewing Wood's death through the lens of potential foul play, with her husband as the focus of their investigation. So what really happened to Natalie Wood on November 29, 1981? After 40 years of investigation, reinvestigation, changing stories, and new witnesses, can we finally answer the questions posed in our opening? The truth, as it emerges from the accumulated evidence, is both disturbing and complex. While no murder charges have ever been filed, the case now points to a scenario far removed from the simple accident initially presented to the public. The current Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department investigation supports a sequence of events that begins with a jealousy-fueled argument. Wagner, by multiple accounts including Davern's, was increasingly agitated about Wood's professional relationship with Walken. The dinner at Doug's Harbor Reef restaurant on Catalina earlier that evening had been tense, with witnesses reporting that Wagner appeared possessive and irritated by Wood and Walken's conversation about her career. Back on the yacht, this tension escalated into what Davern and Walken described as a heated argument, culminating in Wagner smashing a wine bottle. Wood retreated to her stateroom. What happened next is where accounts diverge most dramatically. The physical evidence, particularly the bruising on Wood's body, suggests some form of physical altercation before she entered the water. The fact that she was found wearing a down jacket indicates she wasn't preparing for bed when she ended up overboard. The location and condition of the dinghy, found beached with its oars in place, contradicts the theory that she was trying to board it when she fell. Most critically, the witness accounts of a woman calling for help in the water around midnight directly contradict Wagner's claim that he didn't notice Wood was missing until later. If these witnesses are to be believed, Wood was alive in the water, conscious and calling for help, while those aboard the Splendor did nothing, either because they didn't hear her or, more troublingly, because they chose not to respond. The delayed reporting of Wood's disappearance, with hours passing before authorities were notified, remains one of the most suspicious elements of the case. This delay potentially turned what might have been a rescue into a recovery operation. While investigators have stopped short of formally accusing Wagner of directly causing Wood's death, they have made it clear they believe he knows more than he has ever revealed. Lieutenant Corina stated bluntly in 2018, "I think he knows more about what happened to his wife than he's ever said." The most likely scenario, based on the totality of evidence now available, is that Wood's death followed a physical altercation with Wagner, whether he intended her to end up in the water or not. The bruising, the witnesses hearing cries for help, the delayed reporting, and the changing stories all point to something far more complex and disturbing than a simple accident. What we can say with certainty is this: Natalie Wood did not simply fall off a boat while trying to secure a dinghy. The evidence now strongly suggests she entered the water as the result of a confrontation, and that crucial opportunities to save her life were missed or deliberately ignored in the hours that followed. In the 4 decades since Natalie Wood's death, the case has taken numerous turns, leaving a trail of consequences for all involved. Robert Wagner, now in his 90s, has maintained his innocence throughout, though he has refused to speak with investigators since the case was reopened. His career continued after Wood's death. He starred in the hit television series Heart to Heart until 1984 and later found success in the Austin Powers films. He remarried in 1990 to actress Jill Saint. John and has continued to be a presence in Hollywood. Wagner's 2008 memoir, Pieces of My Heart, addressed Wood's death but maintained the accident narrative. He acknowledged the argument that night but claimed it was with Walken, not Wood, and centered on Walken encouraging Wood to prioritize her career over family. Wagner wrote that he believed Wood had gone to bed after the argument, and only realized she was missing when he went to their stateroom later. Christopher Walken has remained largely silent about the events of that night. He cooperated with investigators when the case was reopened, but has rarely spoken publicly about Wood's death. His career flourished in the years following the tragedy, with an Oscar nomination for Catch Me If You Can and dozens of memorable roles. Whatever he witnessed on the Splendor, Walken has kept it largely to himself. Dennis Davern's life took a different turn. After co-authoring Goodbye Natalie, Goodbye Splendor in 2009 and making numerous media appearances about the case, he has faced accusations of exploiting the tragedy for financial gain. Yet his account has been taken seriously by investigators who cite his insider knowledge of the events as crucial to the reopened investigation. For Wood's daughters, Natasha Gregson Wagner and Courtney Wagner, the ongoing investigation has meant living their entire adult lives in the shadow of their mother's mysterious death. Natasha, who was just 11 when her mother died, has largely defended Wagner, whom she considers her father. In 2020, she produced the documentary Natalie Wood, What Remains Behind, which presented a more sympathetic view of Wagner. Courtney, who was only 7 at the time of her mother's death, has struggled with substance abuse issues that some close to the family attribute to the trauma of losing her mother at such a young age. Lana Wood, Natalie's sister, has been one of the most vocal advocates for reopening the investigation, publicly calling for Wagner to tell the truth. Her relationship with Wagner, once close, has disintegrated over her insistence that he hasn't been forthcoming about the events of that night. The investigation itself has gone through multiple phases. After being reopened in 2011, it was reclassified as cold and open in 2013, meaning active investigation had paused, but the case remained unsolved. Then, in 2018, came the bombshell announcement that Wagner was now a person of interest. As of 2023, Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department officials have acknowledged that the case may never result in criminal charges. The passage of time, the death of key witnesses, and the challenges of building a case 4 decades after the fact make prosecution increasingly unlikely. However, they maintain that the investigation remains open and that they continue to follow new leads as they emerge. Perhaps the most significant development came in 2013 when the Los Angeles County coroner amended Wood's death certificate, changing the cause of death from accidental drowning to drowning and other undetermined factors. This official acknowledgement that Wood's death might not have been accidental represents a vindication for those who have long questioned the original findings. Today, Wood's grave at Westwood Village Memorial Park in Los Angeles continues to draw visitors who remember her films and remain fascinated by the circumstances of her death. Her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame serves as another reminder of her legacy, both the brilliant career and the enduring mystery surrounding its premature end. As one investigator put it, "This case will never be closed until we know the truth." For now, that truth remains elusive, even as the evidence increasingly suggests that what happened on the Splendor that night was far darker than initially portrayed. The Natalie Wood case stands as a stark reminder of how celebrity can distort the pursuit of truth. In 1981, Wood was one of Hollywood's most beloved stars, and Wagner was an established industry figure with powerful connections. The pressure to resolve the case quickly, to give both the public and the industry a narrative they could accept, appears to have compromised the thoroughness of the original investigation. What might have triggered a more rigorous investigation had it involved ordinary citizens was instead wrapped up neatly in 2 weeks when it involved Hollywood royalty. The initial investigators seemed almost eager to accept the accident theory, despite the contradictory evidence and puzzling circumstances. It was easier, perhaps, to believe that a beloved actress met with a tragic accident than to consider that something more sinister might have occurred, especially when the alternative would implicate another cherished figure. This case forces us to confront an uncomfortable reality. Our justice system doesn't always work the same for the famous as it does for the ordinary. The reopening of the investigation decades later suggests an attempt to correct this imbalance, to ensure that fame doesn't shield anyone from proper scrutiny when a life has been lost under suspicious circumstances. As Natalie Wood's sister, Lana, has said, "She deserves the truth no matter how many years later." That principle, that the truth matters regardless of who is involved and how much time has passed, is perhaps the most important lesson from this enduring mystery. Justice delayed may be justice denied, but the pursuit of truth remains essential, especially when it has been obscured by the blinding light of celebrity. If you've stayed with us this long, you're clearly as fascinated by this case as we are. So here's my question for you. Do you think Robert Wagner has been treated fairly by investigators, or should he have been scrutinized more closely from the beginning? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this deep dive into one of Hollywood's most enduring mysteries compelling, hit that subscribe button. We've got more untold stories from the darkest corners of celebrity culture coming your way. And if you know someone who's always been intrigued by the Natalie Wood case, share this video with them. Sometimes the pursuit of truth is better when it's shared. Until next time, remember, in Hollywood, the most dramatic stories often happen when the cameras stop rolling.